They told him he'd never be a singer. Not because he didn't love music, but because they didn't believe in him. A shy boy stood in a classroom, holding his guitar while his dream was dismissed, with one sentence, "You have no future." In music, that boy was Elvis. And what happened next didn't just change his life. It changed the world forever. The classroom was quiet in the way only a schoolroom can be: wooden desks lined in neat rows, sunlight slipping through tall windows, dust floating gently in the air. Young Elvis stood at the front, his hands trembling as they gripped a worn guitar. Was almost too big for him. His heart beat loudly in his chest, louder than the whispers behind him, louder than his own breathing. Music was the only place where he felt safe. When he sang, the world made sense. He took a breath and began. His voice wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest, raw with feeling, shaped by gospel hymns, late-night radio songs, and the quiet hope of a boy who dreamed bigger than his surroundings. For a brief moment, Elvis forgot where he was. He forgot the faces watching him. He forgot his fear. Then the song ended. Silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable. A few students exchanged glances. Someone snickered. Another laughed openly. Elvis felt his face burn as he lowered his eyes, suddenly aware of every flaw, every shaky note, every second he had dared to believe. The teacher cleared their throat. "You don't have a singing voice," they said flatly. "You should focus on something more realistic." The words hit harder than any laughter ever could. Elvis stood frozen, the guitar slipping slightly in his hands. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to explain that music wasn't just something he liked, it was who he was, that singing made him feel alive. That when he sang, he felt close to something bigger than himself. But no one asked how he felt. "You'll never be a singer," the teacher added, turning away as if the matter was settled. That sentence followed him like a shadow. As he walked back to his seat, the room felt colder. The same classmates who had listened just moments earlier now avoided his eyes. Some smiled awkwardly. Others didn't care at all. To them, it was just another day. To Elvis, it felt like the end of a dream. He stared down at his desk, tracing small scratches in the wood, fighting the sting in his eyes. Was the teacher right? Was he foolish for believing he had something special to give the world? Doubt crept in quietly, wrapping itself around his heart. Yet beneath the embarrassment, beneath the shame, something stubborn remained. A small, flickering voice inside him whispered, "They don't know what music means to you. They don't know your heart." That day, Elvis learned a painful truth sometimes. The people meant to guide you can be the ones who wound you the deepest. But he also learned something else, something he wouldn't understand until much later. Rejection doesn't always come to stop you. Sometimes, it comes to test how badly you're willing to keep going. And though the world had just told him, never, the boy with the guitar quietly held on to his dream, unsure how, unsure when, but unwilling to let it die. The front door creaked open as Elvis stepped inside, his shoulders slumped, his guitar hanging low at his side. The house was small, modest, and filled with the comforting smell of supper. It should have felt like safety, but that day, his heart felt too heavy to notice. His mother looked up from the kitchen table and knew immediately. A mother always knows. She didn't rush him with questions. She didn't ask what went wrong or why his eyes looked distant. Instead, she gently wiped her hands on a cloth and offered him a seat. In her silence was patience, and in her patience was kindness. Elvis sat down slowly, staring at the floor. "They said I'll never be a singer," he finally whispered. The words felt sharper, spoken aloud. The teacher said, "I don't have a voice." For a moment, his mother said nothing. She reached across the table and rested her hand over his warm, steady, unshaken. That single touch did more than any speech ever could. It told him he wasn't alone. "Sing for me," she said softly. Elvis hesitated. The classroom laughter still echoed in his mind. His throat tightened, and doubt pressed down on his chest. But his mother's eyes held no judgment, only belief. Slowly, he lifted his guitar. Angie began to play. His voice cracked. It wasn't perfect, but it carried something real. She listened as if the world had paused just for him. When the song ended, she smiled, not the kind of smile given out of politeness, but one filled with quiet pride. "I don't hear a boy who should quit," she said. "I hear a boy who feels music." Elvis looked up, surprised. She leaned closer. "People will tell you who you are based on their limits, not yours. Don't let their fear become your future." Those words settled deep inside him. She told him stories of hard days, of dreams she once had, of how life can be unkind, but how kindness, even in small moments, can keep a soul alive. She reminded him that success isn't born from approval, but from perseverance. That night, she placed her faith in him when the world had taken its away. Later, as Elvis lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the ache in his chest softened. The rejection still hurt, but now it shared space with something stronger, hope. He realized something important. One kind voice can be louder than a room full of doubt. One person's belief can outweigh 100 rejections. In that humble home, without applause or recognition, a future legend was quietly being rebuilt by praise, but by compassion. Elvis didn't fall asleep dreaming of fame. He fell asleep believing he was allowed to keep dreaming. And sometimes, that is where greatness truly begins. Life didn't change overnight after that day. There were no sudden opportunities, no cheering crowds, no proof that the teacher had been wrong. What changed instead was something quieter, something deeper. Elvis kept going. He sang when no one was watching. In the early mornings, before the world fully woke up, he practiced softly so he wouldn't disturb anyone. His voice filled the small rooms of his home, mixing with the hum of the radio and the distant sounds of the street. Each note carried the weight of doubt, but also the strength of determination. Money was scarce. Dreams felt expensive. Yet music cost him nothing but courage. Elvis took whatever work he could find, carrying his guitar with him like a companion. He sang at local gatherings, small venues, and anywhere someone would listen even if they didn't stay. Sometimes people talked over him, sometimes they walked away mid-song, and sometimes someone would stop, close their eyes, and truly hear. Pangium, those moments kept him alive. He wasn't singing for fame. He sang for connection. For the people who felt lost. For the ones who had been told they weren't enough. When Elvis sang, he poured his own struggles into every lyric. His voice became a bridge between broken hearts, including his own. There were nights when exhaustion crept in, when doubt returned, louder than hope. He remembered the teacher's words, sharp and dismissive. "You'll never be a singer." On those nights, he almost believed it. But then he remembered his mother listening at the kitchen table. So he sang again. His voice began to change, not just in sound, but in depth. Pain shaped it. Persistence strengthened it. Every rejection taught him resilience. Every small act of kindness from a stranger, a nod, a smile, a whispered "you're good," became fuel. Elvis learned that music wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty. He watched the faces of those who listened closely. He saw relief, joy, and sometimes tears. In those moments, he realized something powerful. His voice didn't need approval to matter. It was already doing what it was meant to reach people. Slowly, without realizing it, he was becoming the singer they said he never could be. Not because the world changed its mind, but because he refused to abandon himself. The quiet fight shaped him more than applause ever could. Each song was a small act of courage. Each performance was an offering of hope. Elvis didn't know where this road would lead. He only knew that quitting would mean silencing the one thing that made him feel alive. And so he kept singing, loudly, not proudly, but faithfully. Because sometimes, the bravest battles are the ones fought in silence. The first time Elvis heard his voice crackle through a radio, he didn't recognize it as the sound of victory. It felt unreal, almost fragile, like something that could vanish if he listened too closely. He stood still, heart racing, as the room filled with the same voice once dismissed in a classroom. Only now, the world was listening. Radio stations across America began playing his songs. Truck drivers turned up the volume on long highways. Teenagers pressed their ears closer to speakers late at night. Families paused to their conversations, drawn in by a voice that carried something familiar, longing, hope, and truth. Elvis didn't just sing notes. He sang feelings people didn't know how to name. Crowds started gathering. Small rooms became larger halls. Faces blurred together, but their emotions were unmistakable. Some smiled. Some cried. Some stood in stunned silence, as if they were witnessing something rare. Elvis felt it too, the electricity in the air, the invisible connection between his voice and their hearts. Fame came fast, but it didn't harden him. Backstage, Elvis remained the same quiet soul shaped by rejection and kindness. He remembered the nights of doubt, the empty rooms, the teacher's words. Instead of bitterness, those memories kept him grounded. He treated everyone, musicians, workers, strangers, with respect, knowing how powerful a single kind moment could be. When critics called him different, strange, or impossible to define, he didn't argue. His voice had never fit neatly into expectations, and that was its power. The same people who once questioned his ability now called him revolutionary. Newspapers praised him. Audiences screamed his name. The transformation was complete, just from unknown to famous, but from wounded boy to confident artist. Yet his greatest triumph wasn't fame. It was realizing that his pain had purpose. Every rejection had carved depth into his voice. Every act of kindness had taught him humility. Every silent struggle had prepared him to carry the emotions of millions. Elvis stood on stage one night, lights blinding, applause roaring, and thought back to the classroom where it all began. The teacher's words no longer echoed with power. They had been replaced by something stronger, the sound of belief, multiplied across the world. He didn't sing to prove anyone wrong. He sang to prove something right, that broken dreams can become bridges, that compassion can outlive criticism, that one voice, once silenced, can inspire generations. The boy who was told never had become a symbol of possibility. And in that transformation, the world learned a lesson far bigger than music. When talent meets perseverance and kindness fuels the journey, history listens. Long after the lights dimmed and the crowds faded, Elvis often found himself thinking about where it all began, not with fame, but with doubt. Success had given him a voice heard around the world, yet it was the quiet moments that mattered most. To him, moments that reminded him why he never stopped singing. He never forgot the sting of rejection. And because of that, he chose compassion over pride. Elvis became known not just for his music, but for his heart. He listened to people, others. Overlooked young musicians, shy children, struggling artists, because he recognized himself in their uncertainty. When they told him their dreams, he didn't laugh or dismiss them. He encouraged them, knowing how far one kind word can travel. He gave back generously, often quietly, without cameras or applause. To him, kindness was never a performance. Was a responsibility? In interviews, when asked about his rise to fame, Elvis rarely spoke about the teacher who doubted him. Instead, he spoke about belief, about the power of being seen, about how music can heal wounds words never reach. He understood that his story wasn't just his own, it belonged to anyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. His legacy grew beyond records and stages. It lived in the courage of people who kept trying, in the voices that refused to be silenced, in the dreamers who chose hope over fear. One evening, after a long performance, Elvis sat alone, guitar resting against his knee. He strummed softly, not for an audience, but for himself. In that moment, he wasn't a legend. He was still that boy who loved music only. Now, he understood his purpose. He had turned rejection into resonance. The world remembers Elvis as an icon, but perhaps his greatest gift was this reminder: a single act of kindness can change a life. A single voice of belief can rewrite a future. Somewhere, a child was being told they would never succeed. Somewhere, a dream was trembling under doubt. And because Elvis kept singing, because someone once chose to listen, that child might choose to keep going too. His story doesn't end with fame. It continues every time someone refuses to give up. And that is the most beautiful song of all.